Guilty to the Alaska Bear Law violation because I'm guilty. I couldn't answer that. I remember the crime, Elvis's age. Probably the only performance that could do this. See the old city of Cape. Yeah, Jamaica. They sold millions of records and shaped the music industry, but behind the fame their beliefs were shocking. Racism, hate speech, and dark secrets. These musicians left a legacy no one talks about, and trust me, number one will leave you speechless. 20. Shaky Jake Harris. Music is supposed to bring people together, but one legendary bluesman had a much darker side. His words weren't just controversial, they were shockingly xenophobic. He didn't just dislike outsiders, he actively made sure people knew about it. Shaky Jake Harris was a well-known blues musician, loved for his storytelling and harmonica skills, but when it came to artists from outside America, he had some very strong and disturbing opinions. He openly voiced his hatred toward non-American musicians, claiming they were trying to steal the blues and didn't deserve to play it. In interviews, he dismissed the contributions of black musicians outside the U.S. He believed blues should be kept American, and saw foreign artists as intruders rather than contributors. His views, while not uncommon among some older bluesmen, were extreme even for his time. He wasn't subtle about it either. He refused to collaborate with non-American artists and would make public comments against them. His words left a stain on his legacy, making it clear that he viewed the blues as something that belonged only to a specific group. But if you think his take on cultural purity was shocking, the next name on this list built his entire career by whitewashing black culture and erasing its true pioneers. $19 quotient, $19 minimum. Paul Whiteman. They called him the king of jazz, but there's just one problem. He didn't invent jazz. He simply took it, erased its origins, and became rich while suppressing the very people who did create it. Paul Whiteman was a band leader in the early 1900s who became famous for bringing jazz to white audiences. His music was polished, sophisticated, and structured, nothing like the raw, expressive jazz created by black musicians. But because he had the right connections, he was given credit for elevating jazz into a respectable genre. He was openly dismissive of the black musicians who pioneered the genre. He once complained that his version of jazz was refined compared to the primitive versions played in black communities. This wasn't just racism, it was erasure. While artists like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington were pushing jazz to incredible new heights, Whiteman was the one getting all the headlines and praise. His music was jazz without the soul, and while he never outright banned black artists from working with him, he never went out of his way to include them either. Even today, Whiteman's legacy remains one of theft and exclusion. He didn't create jazz, he just packaged it in a way that made it acceptable to white audiences. And up next, a musician whose folk songs became legendary, but hidden beneath them were ugly racist undertones that still make people uncomfortable today. 18. Jimmy Driftwood. His folk songs shaped American music, his lyrics told stories of history, and his influence stretched for generations. But, hidden between the verses, an uncomfortable history of racism that people rarely talk about. Jimmy Driftwood was a well-respected folk musician, best known for his song The Battle of New Orleans, which became a huge hit in 1959. His music celebrated American history, but many of his songs carried undertones of racial superiority and reinforced harmful stereotypes about Native Americans and black people. Driftwood often glorified westward expansion in the Manifest Destiny era without acknowledging its brutality toward indigenous people. Some of his lyrics frame Native Americans as obstacles rather than victims of colonization. His music subtly reinforced the idea that white settlers were heroes, while indigenous people were simply in the way. Beyond his songs, Driftwood also associated himself with segregationist views during the civil rights era. He didn't explicitly promote hate, but he also didn't support equality. His passive stance, combined with his storytelling style, helped romanticize a version of American history that ignored its darkest truths. His legacy in folk music is undeniable, but his songs? They carried a message that wasn't as innocent as people once believed. But if Driftwood's racism was hidden in lyrics, the next name on this list? He openly performed some of the most racist songs ever recorded. 17. Arthur Collins. Music from the early 1000s 900s, might seem innocent, but dig deeper, and you'll find songs so openly racist they make modern audiences cringe. Collins was a pioneer in American recording history, famous for his loud, clear singing voice, but his biggest hits? They were filled with racial slurs, offensive stereotypes, and degrading portrayals of Black Americans. His songs like The Preacher and the Bear and All Coons Look Alike to Me were wildly popular, but they reinforced some of the most harmful and degrading stereotypes of the time. Collins made a fortune mocking Black culture, and these songs weren't just entertainment. They were used to justify racism in everyday society. Even more disturbing, his recordings were played in minstrel shows where white actors wore blackface and performed exaggerated, insulting versions of Black life. Collins helped cement these racist ideas into mainstream culture, shaping the way an entire generation viewed race. His music is rarely played today, but its impact lingers. He was one of the first recording stars in American history, and his influence on early music is undeniable. But so is his role in spreading racist caricatures, and if you think that was shocking, wait until you hear about the man who used his massive influence to keep jazz in white hands. For your channel, a fraction of the cost, Autoscripter AI helps your videos go viral. In just 3 steps, Autoscripter AI creates a polished script tailored to your needs. Just input your title concept, select your tone and style. The intuitive interface makes editing and refining effortless, fast, smart, and trusted by hundreds of satisfied users who have already discovered the amazing tool. 16. Let Me Kill Mr. No. He was a rock and roll icon, a hard-living, fast-playing legend who helped shape heavy metal. But behind the leather and whiskey, his obsession with Nazi memorabilia and his controversial comments made many fans deeply uncomfortable. Lem Kill Mr., the frontman of rock music, had an undeniable influence on rock music. His aggressive playing style and rebellious persona made him a hero to many, but when people saw his massive collection of Nazi memorabilia, it raised serious concerns. Lemmy owned SS uniforms, medals, swastika-covered artifacts, and other Nazi items. When asked about it, he brushed it off as a historical interest, rather than an endorsement. But then, his comments started making people question whether it was just collecting or something more. In one interview, he said that the bad guys always had the best uniform, and downplayed the horrors of the Nazi regime. While he later insisted he wasn't a Nazi supporter, many people felt he failed to grasp the weight of what he was joking about. Unlike others on this list, Lemmy didn't make outright racist statements, but his casual attitude toward Nazi imagery left a stain on his legacy. Some fans defended him, saying he was just fascinated by history. But when that history involves the worst atrocities in human history, fascination turns into something far more disturbing. And if you think his obsession with Nazi symbols was bad, wait until you hear about the man who helped erase Black musicians from jazz history. 15. Pat Boone. Pat Boone was one of the biggest pop stars of the 950s, but his success came at the expense of Black artists. Instead of creating his own music, Boone built his career by covering R&B and rock and roll songs originally performed by Black musicians without giving them proper credit. Artists like Little Richard and Fats Domino were revolutionizing the music scene with their energetic, soulful performances. But at a time when mainstream, white audiences were hesitant to embrace Black artists, Boone's sanitized versions of their songs became massive hits. His recordings of Tutti Frutti and Ain't That a Shame outsold the originals, reinforcing the industry's racial barriers. Boone also aligned himself with conservative, pro-segregation audiences. He positioned himself as the clean-cut alternative to Black rock musicians, ensuring his music remained palatable to white radio stations. Even later in life, Boone made dismissive remarks about racial inequality, further cementing his controversial legacy. 14. Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton is a legendary guitarist, a rock icon whose influence stretches across decades. But while his music is celebrated, his personal beliefs have left many questioning his legacy. His most infamous moment? A 1976 concert where he delivered one of the most shocking racist rants in music history. Clapton, visibly drunk on stage, launched into a tirade supporting Enoch Powell, a British politician known for his racist anti-immigrant views. He shouted racial slurs, told foreigners to get out of the UK, and warned that England was becoming a black colony. His words weren't just offensive, they were dangerous, fueling racial tensions in a country already dealing with issues of immigration and discrimination. The backlash was immediate. Many fans and fellow musicians condemned him, but Clapton refused to apologize for years. Instead, he doubled down on his views, dismissing criticism as political correctness. Even decades later, he made controversial statements about race, often playing the victim when called out. Clapton's legacy is complicated. While his guitar skills are undeniable, his past actions have left a permanent stain on his reputation. Some argue he was just a drunk, reckless rock star. Others believe his words exposed deep-seated beliefs. Either way, his racist outburst remains one of the most disturbing moments in rock history. 13. Ted Nugent. These monsters, they're monsters. They hate. Our president was born to America, guilty to the Alaska Bear Law violation because I'm guilty. He's a rock legend known for his guitar shredding and outspoken personality, but Ted Nugent's career has been just as defined by his extreme right-wing and racist remarks as it has been by his music. Nugent has a long history of making offensive comments about race, particularly against Black and Native American communities. He has used racial slurs in interviews, dismissed the struggles of marginalized groups, and aligned himself with white nationalistic rhetoric. He's even been accused of inciting violence with his inflammatory statements about minorities and immigrants. One of his most infamous remarks came when he called former President Barack Obama a subhuman mongrel, a term historically used by white supremacists. He has also mocked indigenous cultures and downplayed the historical mistreatment of Native Americans, often making racist jokes about reservations and tribal sovereignty. Despite his undeniable influence in rock music, Nugent's legacy is stained by his divisive, racially charged rhetoric. While his fans defend him as simply being outspoken, his repeated attacks on minority communities suggest something far more toxic. 12. L. Jolson. Listen so hard I'll froze to death. Never thought I'd miss you. Yeah, he was once called the world's greatest entertainer, but what he's most remembered for today? His role in making blackface mainstream in American entertainment. His performances weren't just offensive, they helped cement racist stereotypes in pop culture for decades. His performances helped keep blackface entertainment alive far longer than it should have been. Even today, the jazz singer remains banned in some places, and his legacy is forever tied to one of the most degrading forms of racism in entertainment history. But the next musician? He wasn't just racist. His songs helped define American minstrel culture itself. 11. Stephen Foster. You might not recognize his name, but you've definitely heard his music. He wrote some of the most famous American folk songs ever, but they were built on racist caricatures. Stephen Foster, often called the father of American music, wrote classic songs like Oh Susanna and Camptown Races. But there's a problem. Many of his songs were specifically written for minstrel shows. Minstrel shows were a form of racist entertainment where white performers in blackface exaggerated black dialect and culture for comedic effect. Foster's music provided the soundtrack to this degrading spectacle. His songs featured lyrics that portrayed black people as foolish, childlike, and happy to be enslaved. One of his biggest songs, Old Folks at Home, was written from the perspective of an enslaved black man longing for the good old days on the plantation. It was a direct attempt to romanticize slavery, and for years it was even the official state song of Florida. His music was so widely accepted that it shaped generations of racial stereotypes. Even though later adaptations of his songs removed the most offensive parts, his original work remains one of the most blatant examples of racism in early American music. His influence on folk music is undeniable, but so is his contribution to the racist legacy of minstrelsy. And if you thought Foster's impact was bad, wait until you hear about the next musician, who wasn't just a songwriter but an open supporter of white supremacy. 10. John Philip Sousa. As clues to painful life, we solve this problem. He was the March King, the man behind America's most famous patriotic songs. His music is still played at every 4th of July celebration. But what most people don't know? He also played a major role in spreading racist minstrel entertainment. John Philip Sousa, best known for Stars and Stripes Forever and the Washington Post March, was a giant in American music. But beyond his famous marches, he enthusiastically promoted minstrel shows, a degrading form of entertainment where white performers wore blackface and mocked black culture. Sousa wasn't just a passive supporter, he actively composed music for minstrel acts and helped popularize their performances. He saw minstrel shows as a key part of American culture, and rather than challenge their racist roots, he fully embraced them. Even more disturbing, he pushed back against the growing influence of black musicians in the classical world. When jazz and blues began rising in popularity, he dismissed them as lesser forms of music, reinforcing the idea that black creativity was somehow inferior. Sousa is still honored today for his contributions to American music, but his involvement in minstrel culture is rarely discussed, and if you thought his connection to racist entertainment was shocking, the next musician openly embraced segregationist views and refused to support racial equality. 9. Biff Rose. He started as a quirky folk musician known for his humor and satirical lyrics, but as the years went on, his public persona took a disturbing turn. He wasn't just controversial, he became an outright promoter of racism and anti-Semitist. Biff Rose was once compared to Bob Dylan and Randy Newman, appearing on The Tonight Show multiple times in the 1960th episode. But in his later years he began spewing openly racist and anti-Semitist views online, shocking fans who once admired his work. His social media rants included hateful conspiracy theories, attacks on Jewish people, and bizarre racial comments. He dismissed civil rights efforts as political correctness and actively mocked movements for racial equality. At one point, his statements became so extreme that even his former friends and collaborators cut ties with him. His transformation wasn't just disappointing, it was disturbing. Bands who once saw him as a free-spirited artist now saw him as an unfiltered voice for hate. Rose's legacy is a cautionary tale. His early career showed promise, but his later years revealed just how deep his racism ran. And if you think his comments were bad, the next musician on this list used his music to push an entire segregationist agenda. Earl Scruggs. He revolutionized bluegrass music with his lightning-fast banjo picking, changing the sound of country forever. But beyond his musical genius, he was accused of holding segregationist views, aligning himself with the era's deep-rooted racial divisions. Earl Scruggs was one half of the legendary duo Flatt and Scruggs, famous for hits like Foggy Mountain Breakdown. His banjo style defined an entire genre, but behind the music, he was closely tied to Southern conservative ideals, including segregation. During the civil rights era, while many musicians took a stand for racial justice, Scruggs remained silent. He performed at events where segregation was strictly enforced, and was accused of being quietly supportive, keeping things the way they were. Though he never made explicit racist statements, his refusal to take a stand spoke volumes. Some argue he was simply a product of his time, but in an era when musicians like Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan used their voices for equality, Scruggs' passive acceptance of segregation made him complicit. His music may have united country fans, but his legacy remains tied to an America that refused to change. And speaking of controversial figures in music history, the next name on this list didn't just make racist comments, he openly pushed anti-Semitic conspiracies. Lee Scratch Perry. He was one of reggae's most innovative producers, a musical genius whose influence stretched across genres. But when he opened his mouth, his words were filled with wild, anti-Semitic rants that left fans in shock. Lee Scratch Perry helped shape dub and reggae, producing for legends like Bob Marley. His experimental sound changed music forever, but in his later years, his bizarre statements overshadowed his legacy. He blamed Jewish people for the world's problems, calling them vampires, and spread conspiracy theories about them controlling the music industry. In multiple interviews, went off on long anti-Semitic tirades, claiming that Jewish people had too much power and were responsible for evil in the world. His words weren't just misinterpreted, they were direct, hateful, and deeply disturbing. What made it even stranger? Perry claimed to be spiritually enlightened, often talking about love and unity, but that unity didn't seem to extend to Jewish people, whom he repeatedly attacked in interviews, social media posts, and even in his lyrics. Despite his musical brilliance, Perry's public image became tainted by his hateful rhetoric. His fans were left questioning how someone who once preached peace could hold such deeply ingrained hate. And if you think his comments were extreme, wait until you hear about the next musician. who not only spread racism, but did it with the full force of the U.S. government behind him. 6. Spade Cooley, who is a country music legend, a talented fiddler who became a Hollywood star, but behind the spotlight, he was not only racist, he was a violent, abusive criminal whose actions horrified even his closest fans. Spade Cooley was one of the most successful Western swing musicians of the 1940s, often called the king of Western swing, but his personal beliefs were deeply rooted in racism. He regularly mocked black musicians, supported segregation, and performed at events that upheld racial barriers. Beyond music, his story takes a dark and horrifying turn. Cooley was a violent, controlling husband, and in 1961 he was convicted of brutally torturing and murdering his wife. He suspected her of cheating, and over the course of hours he beat her to death in front of their child. At his trial, witnesses recalled his cold-blooded, remorseless attitude. He showed no regret, and when sentenced to life in prison, many believed he got off easy. But in a bizarre twist, he was granted parole in 1969, only to die of a heart attack before being released. His story is a chilling reminder that talent doesn't erase cruelty. And if you thought his crimes were disturbing, the next musician didn't just commit personal offenses. He used his influence to erase black artists from history. 5. Hank Williams Sr. He's a country music icon, a voice that shaped American music forever. But his legacy isn't just filled with heartbreak songs.